A single Roosevelt dime, dated 1968, stamped with a small D mint mark, hiding in plain sight while people walk past fortunes every single day. Most folks would toss it into a cup holder or feed it to a vending machine without a second thought. And that's exactly why this story matters. Because somewhere in America, a man once did exactly that. He dumped loose change onto his kitchen table after a long day, annoyed by the weight in his pockets. Quarters rolled onto the floor, pennies stacked up like they always do. And there, mixed in with ordinary dimes, was one coin that didn't look special at all. No gold shine, no dramatic design, just Roosevelt's familiar face. It took years before anyone realized that dime was worth more than most houses on the block. The late 1960s were chaotic for U.S. coinage. Silver was disappearing. The mint was under pressure to produce coins fast, cheap, and in massive quantities. Mistakes happened quietly. No announcements. No alarms. Coins slipped out that were never supposed to exist. And when they did, they blended perfectly into circulation, where they've been hiding for decades. Now here's where your pulse should pick up. The 1968 D. Roosevelt dime is supposed to be a normal-clad coin. No silver, no rarity. But a tiny number were struck wrong. Very wrong. They were struck on the wrong planchet, using silver intended for proof or transitional issues. That single mistake turned pocket change into something collectors would later fight over with six-figure bids, then seven. Then numbers so big they don't even sound real anymore. Picture the first collector who noticed it. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He was just someone who paid attention. He weighed his coins. He listened to the sound they made when dropped on a table. One dime rang differently. Sharper. Cleaner. Almost musical. That sound led to a scale. The scale led to disbelief. And disbelief turned into verification. That dime wasn't supposed to exist. Yet there it was, holding enough silver and rarity to change a life forever. Let that sink in for a moment. A coin smaller than your fingernail, ignored by millions, quietly carrying the potential of $1 million in value. Most people assume valuable coins are ancient, worn smooth by centuries. But this one isn't. It's modern. It looks familiar. And that's what makes it dangerous to overlook. First, look at the date. It must read 1968. Then look just to the right of Roosevelt's neck. You're searching for a small D mint mark, indicating Denver. No D, no jackpot. But the mint mark alone isn't enough. This is where most people give up, and where fortunes are missed. Next comes the weight. A normal 1968 dime weighs about 2.27 grams. The rare silver error version weighs closer to 2.5 grams. That difference sounds tiny, but it's everything. A cheap digital scale could be the most profitable tool you ever buy. Now listen. Drop the dime gently onto a hard surface. A regular clad dime makes a dull thud. The silver error rings. It sings. Old-school collectors swear by this test because silver announces itself if you know how to listen. Then look at the edge. This part gives most people chills. A normal dime has a copper-colored stripe sandwiched between silver layers. The rare silver version does not. It appears solid silver all the way through. No copper core reminding you it's ordinary. Just clean, uniform metal. At this point, your heart should be pounding. Because if a 1968 D dime passes all those tests, you are no longer holding spare change. You're holding a coin that has sold in private transactions for amounts approaching $8 million. And here's the part nobody likes to admit. Many of these coins are still out there. They were never recalled. They were never tracked. They moved through lunch counters, toll booths, jukeboxes, and cash registers for years. Some are still sitting in drawers, coffee cans, and inherited collections where nobody bothered to look closely. Collectors aged 30, 40, 50, even 70 will tell you the same thing. The biggest discoveries don't come from auctions. They come from curiosity, from slowing down, from questioning what everyone else assumes is worthless. One man found his example while rolling coins for the bank. Another spotted one while helping his father clean out a toolbox. These aren't fairy tales. These are documented moments that reshaped lives. Imagine the conversation when an appraiser looks up from the microscope and goes quiet. Imagine being told the coin in your hand isn't just rare, but one of the rarest modern U.S. errors ever discovered. Imagine realizing that what you thought was lunch money is suddenly valued in $1 million, not once, but multiple times over. This isn't about luck. It's about awareness. The mint made mistakes, And those mistakes didn't disappear. They scattered. They hid. And they're waiting. Every time you pass over a dime, you're making a decision. Ignore it or inspect it. Rush or pause. Dismiss or question. History rewards the people who pay attention. The Roosevelt dime was never meant to be glamorous. It was meant to be used. And that's exactly why one wrong strike could vanish into circulation without anyone noticing. Decades later, collectors would realize how few survived, how many were lost, and how insanely valuable the remaining examples became. If you've ever said, "That would never happen to me," remember this. Every major discovery started with someone who wasn't supposed to find anything at all. So tonight, when you empty your pockets, don't rush. When you see a 1968 dime, don't assume. Check the date. Find the D, weigh it. Listen to it. Study the edge. Because history doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a drawer, and somewhere out there, another person is holding a tiny silver disc, unaware that it carries the weight of dreams, second chances, and a future measured not in cents, but in $1,000,000. A dime. A 1977 D. Roosevelt dime that has quietly passed through vending machines, gas station counters, and kitchen jars for decades, while collectors dream of a moment exactly like this. Most people think all valuable coins are locked away in museums or private vaults. That's the comfortable lie. The uncomfortable truth is that history sometimes slips through our fingers every single day. In 1977, America was distracted. Inflation was high. Gas lines were long. Disco was everywhere. The U.S. Mint was focused on speed, not perfection, and Denver was striking millions of Roosevelt dimes without anyone suspecting that a tiny number of them would become legends. This isn't just a story about money. It's a story about timing, mistakes, and ordinary people who almost threw away a fortune. One collector told a story about sorting loose change at his kitchen table late one night, tired, half paying attention, when one dime felt different. Not heavier, not shinier, just different enough to pause. That pause changed his life. Here's what makes this coin so mysterious. On the surface, the 1977 D. Roosevelt dime looks normal. Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile, clean and familiar. The torch on the reverse, flanked by olive and oak branches. Denver Mintmark, a small D to the right of Roosevelt's neck. Millions were made. Almost all are worth exactly 10 cents. Almost out of microscopic error during production created a dime that should never exist. A wrong metal planchet, a strike issue so rare that most mint workers never saw one in their entire careers. These dimes were struck on a silver-based planchet instead of the standard copper-nickel-clad composition used after 1964. That single mistake transformed pocket change into something valued in the $1,000,000 range. Imagine the silence inside the mint when that realization finally surfaced years later. Coins had already been released, spent, lost, dropped between couch cushions. Some were scraped across parking lots. Some were used to buy coffee. And a handful survived. Every minute or two, let this sink in. Someone just like you already found one. Not a millionaire. Not a professional dealer. A regular American who decided to look closer instead of dumping change into AJA or .so. How do you identify it? This is where hope becomes action. First, check the date. It must read 1977, not 1976, not 1978. Exactly 1977. Second, look for the mint mark. A small D near Roosevelt's neck tells you it came from Denver. No D, walk away. This story is only about the Denver Mint. Now comes the part most people skip, and the part that separates dreamers from winners. Weight. A standard clad dime weighs about 2.27 grams. The rare silver planchet version weighs closer to 2.5 grams. That difference may sound tiny, but to collectors it's everything. A cheap digital scale can tell you if you're holding ordinary change or a life-altering mistake. Next, listen to the sound. Drop it gently on a wooden surface. Clad dimes make a dull click. Silver sings. A high, clean ring that lingers just a fraction longer. That sound has made grown men sit down in disbelief. Then inspect the edge. A normal dime shows a copper-colored stripe sandwiched between silver-colored layers. The rare one does not. The edge will appear solid silver, smooth in color, with no hint of copper peeking through. This is where many people's hands start to shake. Condition matters too. Sharp details. Strong strike. clean fields. But even a circulated example of this error can be worth more than a lifetime of savings. In top condition, verified by a professional grading service, collectors have placed values as high as $9,560,000. That's not hype. That's auction-level reality. Think about that number for a second. $1 million isn't a phrase here. It's a doorway. One coin. One moment of curiosity. One decision not to ignore your change. The backstory gets even stranger. Records from the Denver Mint during that period are incomplete. Some suspect a small batch of silver planchets was accidentally mixed in during a late-night run. Others believe experimental materials were involved. No official explanation has ever fully closed the case. That mystery fuels the value. Collectors don't just buy metal. They buy unanswered questions. Every 1 to 2 minutes, the reality shifts again. Somewhere right now, a 1977 D Roosevelt dime is sitting in a coffee can, a sock drawer, a cup holder, waiting. Not screaming for attention. Not glowing. Just waiting for someone who knows what to look for. People often ask why these coins haven't all been found. The answer is simple. Most people never check. They assume rarity is obvious. It isn't. It hides in plain sight, disguised as ordinary. That if you think this only happens to other people, remember this. Every famous error coin was once dismissed as normal. Every million-dollar discovery started with someone doubting, then looking again. And yes, the phrase $1 million deserves to be said out loud, because that's exactly what separates this dime from every other coin in your pocket. It's not fantasy. It's documented. Certified examples exist. The market is real. The demand is fierce. Take a breath. Go slow. Pull out your dimes. Check the date. Check the D, weigh it. Listen to it. Look at the edge. If something feels off, stop. Don't clean it. Don't spend it. Protect it. Imagine the story you'd tell. Not about luck, but about attention. About how you learned what others ignored. About how history rewarded patience. But hiding in plain sight, right where you least expect it, most people would laugh at that idea. A dime worth millions sounds like fantasy. That disbelief is exactly why coins like this slip through fingers every single day. They are ignored, spent, and forgotten because nobody ever stops to look closely enough. The 2005 Mintmark Roosevelt dime begins its story in Denver, a year that seemed completely normal for U.S. coinage. Millions of dimes were struck, rushed into circulation, and scattered across America. Nothing about that year screamed history in the making. And yet, hidden among those ordinary dimes, a microscopic mistake changed everything. This is where the mystery begins. Deep inside the Denver Mint, machines work at incredible speed. Blanks move fast. Dies strike hard. Most of the time, perfection wins. But sometimes, just sometimes, metal meets pressure in the wrong way, at the wrong moment, on the wrong planchet. When that happens, a coin is born that was never supposed to exist. Collectors know this truth well. The most valuable coins in America were not planned. They were accidents. And accidents are rare. Picture someone in 2005 getting change at a gas station, sliding a dime into their cup holder, never realizing they were holding something that could one day be worth more than a mansion. That dime may have passed through dozens of hands since then, each person missing the secret hiding in plain sight. Now let's talk about what makes this 2005 D Roosevelt dime different. Because value like this does not come from age alone. It comes from error, from rarity, from a detail so small it is invisible to careless eyes. Start with the mint mark. Look just to the right of Roosevelt's neck. If you see a clear D, you are holding a Denver minted dime. That alone is not enough, but it is the doorway to the mystery. Now check the metal itself. A standard dime weighs about 2.27 grams and has a copper core sandwiched between nickel layers. Some of the most valuable error dimes were struck on the wrong planchet entirely. That means the coin may feel heavier or lighter than normal. If it looks slightly off in color, brighter, duller, or unusually silvery, your heart should start beating faster. Collectors have discovered dimes struck on silver planchets, foreign planchets, or experimental blanks that were never meant for circulation. These mistakes are the kind that auction houses whisper about. This is where $1 million enters the conversation for the first time, because when a modern coin should not exist in that form, collectors will fight over it. Now flip the coin over. Look at the torch, the olive branch, and the oak branch. On rare error strikes, details may look doubled, shifted, or distorted. Not damage, not wear, True doubling appears rounded and intentional, like a shadow frozen in metal. Machine doubling is flat and worthless. Real doubling is alive. Here's another attention reset. Most people never flip the coin over. Examine the rim. Is it complete all the way around? Is it unusually thick? Does it look uneven or stretched? Some of the rarest dimes were struck off-center or with partial collars, creating shapes the human eye instantly senses as wrong. Then comes one of the biggest clues of all. Sound. Drop the dime gently on a hard surface. A normal clad dime produces a dull click. A silver or wrong metal strike sings with a higher, clearer ring. That sound has made collectors freeze mid-motion because it signals something extraordinary. Imagine hearing that sound and realizing you are holding history. This is not theory. Coins like this have sold for $1 million more than once when the right era, condition, and provenance align. High-grade examples certified by major grading services ignite bidding wars that shock even seasoned collectors, and condition matters. If your dime shows sharp details, clean fields, and minimal wear, the value multiplies. A rare error in poor condition is exciting. A rare error in pristine condition is life-changing. Pause for a moment and think about how many dimes you have ignored in your lifetime. Thousands, tens of thousands, each one handled without a second glance. That is how treasures survive. They hide inside routine. Now another reset. What if the coin has been waiting for you to learn this information? The Roosevelt dime itself honors Franklin D. Roosevelt, a man who believed in resilience and second chances. There is something poetic about a coin bearing his image quietly carrying a second life, a second destiny, far beyond its original purpose. Collectors aged 30 to 70 often say the same thing after discovering a valuable error. I had it all along. I just didn't know what to look for. That knowledge gap is where opportunity lives. That if you suspect you have something special, do not clean it. Cleaning destroys value instantly. Place it in a protective holder. Weigh it with a precise scale. Compare it with a normal dime. Listen to the sound. Study the details. Then seek professional authentication. Certification is the bridge between pocket change and $1 million. Without it, a rare coin is just a rumor. With it, that dime becomes a documented artifact the collecting world can trust. Imagine sitting at a table while bidders compete over a coin that once lived in your drawer. Imagine hearing numbers climb past 6 figures, then 7. That moment begins with curiosity and courage, not luck. And here is the truth that ties it all together. Coins like the 2005 D. Roosevelt dime do not announce themselves. They wait silently. They rely on people assuming nothing special could ever happen to them. But history proves otherwise. Every legendary coin discovery started with someone deciding to look closer. A real coin that has quietly passed through vending machines, gas stations, and coffee shop counters while most people never noticed what they were holding. Tonight, you and I are talking about one of the most shocking modern coin mysteries in U.S. history, a 1997 D. Mintmark Roosevelt dime that turned ordinary pocket change into a life-altering discovery. Let me ask you something. How many dimes have slipped through your fingers in your lifetime? Hundreds? Thousands? Now imagine if just one of those dimes could have paid off your house, secured your retirement, and changed your family's future forever. That thought alone should make you sit up a little straighter, because this is not ancient history or buried treasure. This is a modern American coin, and it's hiding in plain sight. Back in 1997, the Denver Mint was striking millions of Roosevelt dimes. Nothing unusual on the surface. These coins were meant for everyday use, tossed into jars, spent without a second thought. But during that year, something went wrong behind closed doors at the Mint. A tiny deviation, a microscopic mistake, the kind of error that most people would never notice unless they knew exactly what to look for. And that mistake is the reason some collectors today whisper about a dime worth more than most luxury homes. What makes this story even more chilling is that the coin wasn't discovered right away. It didn't come out of a velvet-lined case or a museum vault. It came out of circulation. Someone spent it. Someone else accepted it. And for years, it moved silently through the economy, like a winning lottery ticket nobody scratched. Picture a tired factory worker grabbing a soda after a long shift. He drops a handful of change into the machine. One of those dimes could have been worth millions of dollars. He never knew. That's the part that keeps collectors awake at night. Now let's talk about why this dime matters so much. and why the value climbed into the multi-million-dollar range. The Roosevelt dime is one of the most common coins in America. Because it's common, collectors usually overlook it. But rarity is not just about how many coins were made. It's about how many coins were made correctly. In 1997 at the Denver Mint, a small batch of dimes were struck under unusual conditions. Experts believe a rare, transitional error occurred involving the planchet, the metal blank the coin is struck on. These dimes show characteristics that do not match standard 1997 D production. The metal composition, weight, and strike quality tell a story that shouldn't exist according to official mint records. This is where the mystery deepens. Some of these dimes appear to have been struck on experimental or incorrect planchets, possibly intended for another denomination or another testing phase. That alone would be incredible. But combine that with a near-perfect strike and pristine condition, and you have a coin that collectors would fight over. One verified example shocked the numismatic world when it crossed the auction block. Bidding didn't start high. It exploded. Collectors recognized what they were seeing, and the final price stunned everyone watching. Over $8 million for a dime most people wouldn't bend down to pick up. Think about that for a moment. A coin smaller than your fingernail. A coin you've probably spent without thinking. Suddenly worth more than a mansion. That's not just money. That's a second chance at life. Now here's where your heart rate should go up, because identifying this coin is not impossible. You don't need a lab or $1 million microscope. You need patience, focus, and the willingness to look closer than the average person. First, check the date. It must be 1997. Then look just to the right of Roosevelt's neck. You're searching for the D mint mark, indicating Denver. No D means it's not the coin we're talking about. Next, pay attention to the weight. A standard Roosevelt dime weighs about 2.27 grams. The rare versions can show a noticeable deviation, often slightly heavier or lighter depending on the planchet error. A small digital scale can reveal something your eyes can't. Now examine the edges. The reading on these rare dimes may appear sharper, uneven, or slightly off compared to normal circulation dimes. This is subtle, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Look at the surface under good light. The most valuable examples show an unusually strong strike. Roosevelt's facial details appear crisp. The torch on the reverse looks bold and deeply impressed. This isn't a weak, blurry coin. It almost looks too perfect. Here's another critical clue that most people miss. Some of these dimes exhibit a slightly different tone or color, hinting at a metal composition anomaly. It's not dramatic, but when placed next to a normal 1997 dime, the difference can stand out, and condition matters. A circulated example could still be valuable, but the $1 million prices come from coins that survived in incredible shape. Coins that somehow avoided scratches, dents, and wear while bouncing around the real world. Now let me tell you why this story is so emotional for collectors. One man reportedly owned one of these dimes for years without knowing what it was. It sat in a drawer with spare change. He almost cashed it in at a bank during a rough financial period. At the last moment, curiosity stopped him. That single decision turned stress into security. That's why this coin represents more than money. It represents hope. It represents the idea that life-changing opportunity doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. The phrase $1 million gets thrown around a lot online, but in this case, it's not hype. This dime crossed into the realm of $1 million because it breaks every expectation we have about modern coins. It proves that history is still being written in our pockets. And here's the part that should send a chill down your spine. Experts believe not all of these dimes have been found. Some are still missing, still circulating, still waiting in jars, drawers, and glove compartments across America. No one knows. That uncertainty is what fuels collectors to keep searching. If you collect coins, this is the kind of story that reminds you why you started. The thrill of the hunt. The dream that the next coin you check could change everything. So tonight, don't rush past your change. Don't assume modern coins are worthless. Pull out those dimes. Check the dates. Check the mint marks. Weigh them. Compare them. Because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary can be less than the thickness of a fingernail. A coin that blends in, hides quietly, and waits for the one person who knows what to look for. Today, that coin is the 2013 Mintmark Roosevelt dime. And if you've ever handled loose change, This story might hit closer to home than you expect. I want you to picture an ordinary afternoon. Maybe you're cleaning out your car or dumping a jar of change onto the kitchen table. The sound of coins clinking together, familiar, boring, routine. That sound has masked life-changing discoveries before. People just like you, men who worked hard their whole lives, stumbled onto coins worth more than their homes, more than their retirement accounts. And the craziest part is they almost missed it. The Roosevelt dime has always been a quiet coin. It doesn't scream rarity. It doesn't flash like gold. It's been in circulation since 1946, honoring a president most Americans respect but rarely think about anymore. By 2013, the dime was so common it was practically invisible. Millions were struck. Billions passed through hands. That's exactly why this story feels unbelievable. Back in 2013, the Philadelphia Mint was producing dimes at a massive scale. Everything was automated. High-speed presses, tight schedules. And yet, even in the most advanced minting systems on Earth, mistakes happen. Sometimes microscopic, sometimes catastrophic, and sometimes perfect storms. Collectors later began noticing something strange. A handful of 2013 P. Roosevelt dimes didn't look quite right. At first glance, they seemed normal. Same size, same weight, same familiar profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt staring off to the left. But under magnification, the truth started to emerge. These dimes weren't supposed to exist in the form they were found. Some were struck on the wrong metal planchets. Some showed dramatic die errors that should have been caught and destroyed. Others revealed doubled design elements so sharp they looked intentional. And a few, just a few, combined multiple rare errors into a single coin. That's when the whispers started. That's when auction houses paid attention. That's when the phrase $1 million stopped sounding ridiculous. One particular 2013 P dime surfaced quietly. No headlines, no fanfare, just a collector who had learned to slow down and really look. When it was authenticated, jaws dropped. The metal composition alone was wrong for a standard dime. Then the strike quality told another story. Then the dime markers confirmed it. By the time grading was complete, the value estimate crossed into territory most collectors only dream about. Over $5 million. Think about that for a second. A dime, 10 cents. A coin you've probably tossed into a tip jar or dropped between couch cushions. A coin smaller than your thumbnail, quietly holding enough value to change generations of a family. What makes this even more haunting is that the 2013 P Mintmark dime doesn't announce itself. There's no big error stamped on it. No obvious hole or missing piece. You have to know how to look. And that's where most people fail. So let's slow this down and talk about identification, because this is where attention turns into opportunity. First, check the obverse, the front of the coin. You should see Roosevelt's profile facing left. Look closely at the word liberty. On rare error examples, the letters may appear doubled, slightly shadowed, or thicker than normal. This isn't damage. This is die doubling, and it's one of the key signs collectors look for. Next, examine the date 2013. Under magnification, the numbers may show separation lines or a subtle echo effect. Again, this isn't wear. In fact, many of the most valuable examples are in shockingly good condition because they were pulled from circulation early, often by accident. Now, look for the mint mark. The P mint mark should be just above the date area, indicating Philadelphia. If the mint mark looks weak, misplaced, or unusually shaped, your pulse should start to rise. Mint mark anomalies are rare in modern coins, and when they appear alongside other errors, values can explode. Now flip the coin over. The reverse shows the torch, olive branch, and oak branch. This side tells secrets most people never notice. Look at the torch lines. Are they crisp? Or do they appear doubled or distorted? Check the lettering United States of America and one dime. Any doubling, thickness, or misalignment matters. Here's where it gets serious. Weight. A normal Roosevelt dime weighs about 2.268 grams. Some of the rare 2013 P error dimes were struck on planchets meant for other coins, resulting in noticeable weight differences. Even a small deviation can mean everything. This is where a simple digital scale can uncover a coin worth $1 million. Metal composition is another silent giveaway. Standard dimes are copper-nickel clad, But error examples have been discovered on silver planchets or experimental blanks never intended for circulation. You won't see this with your naked eye, but the sound test, edge examination, and professional analysis can reveal it, and condition matters more than people realize. A coin like this in average circulated condition is rare. In near mint or mint state, it becomes legendary. That's how prices climb from thousands to $1 million territory. What makes this story emotional is how often these coins are overlooked. People assume valuable coins are ancient, gold, covered in dirt from shipwrecks. The truth is far more unsettling. The most valuable coins are often the ones hiding in plain sight, mixed in with coffee change and forgotten jars. There are collectors who spent decades chasing rare coins and never held one worth more than a few thousand. And there are ordinary people who stumbled onto a fortune because they took 5 extra seconds to look. That I've spoken to collectors who still remember the exact moment they realized what they had. Hands shaking, heart pounding, that sudden silence where the world fades out and only the coin exists. One man said he sat at his kitchen table for an hour, staring at a dime, trying to understand how something so small could mean so much. That's the power of modern era coins. They challenge everything we think we know about rarity. They remind us that perfection isn't always valuable. Sometimes mistakes are priceless. And here's the part most people don't like to hear. Coins like this are still out there. Not locked away in museums. Not all graded and slabbed. Some are still circulating. Some are still sitting in drawers. Some are still being spent for face value by people who don't know any better. The 2013 Roosevelt dime isn't a guarantee. Most will be normal. Most will be worth 10 cents. But it only takes one overlooked detail, one wrong planchet, one perfect storm of errors to create a coin that rewrites a life. That's why collectors keep looking. That's why they slow down. That's why they teach their kids and grandkids to pay attention. Because history doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers that the next time you hear coins clink together, don't rush. Don't assume. Look twice. Use a magnifier. Check the weight. Study the details. Because buried in the most ordinary moments are extraordinary possibilities. That sound you just heard in your head, that little click of disbelief, that's the sound of opportunity waking up. Most people think the great coin discoveries are already over. They think every valuable coin has been found, slabbed, locked away in a vault. But history tells a very different story. The biggest finds almost never come from auctions or museums. They come from ordinary people on ordinary days who almost spent something extraordinary. This story begins in 1985. Gas was cheap, cassette tapes ruled the world, and the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia was producing millions of Roosevelt dimes like clockwork. No Mintmark, just a clean date and a familiar face. Nothing special. At least that's what everyone believed. But hidden inside that mountain of everyday dimes, a tiny number were born different. Not different enough to jump out at you in a hurry, but different enough to change a life forever. Here's where it gets strange. In the mid-1980s, the Mint was pushing equipment harder than ever. Dies were reused longer, quality control slipped, and experimental conditions quietly crept into regular production. Coins that should never have existed slipped through. When they were struck, nobody noticed. When they were released, nobody cared. When they landed in pocket change, they became invisible. Now pause for a second and really let that sink in. A coin that could be worth millions of dollars was treated exactly the same as a dime you'd toss into a cup holder. Years later, collectors began noticing rumors. Whispers of a 1985 Roosevelt dime that didn't behave like the rest. One that weighed wrong. One that rang differently when dropped. One that looked ordinary until you really knew what you were looking for. And this is where your attention matters. Because identifying this coin doesn't require a laboratory or $1 million microscope. It requires patience, curiosity, and the willingness to slow down when everyone else rushes. First, the date. 1985. That alone isn't rare. Millions were made. The key is the Mint origin, meaning no mint mark on the front. If you see a D or S, you move on. No mint mark is your starting gate. Now look at Roosevelt himself. On the ultra-valuable examples, the strike is unusually sharp for a Philadelphia dime of that year. The hair detail above the ear looks stronger, deeper, more defined than normal. The cheek doesn't look flat or mushy. It almost feels intentional, like the coin was trying harder than it was supposed to. flip it over. Look at the torch. On most 1985 dimes, the horizontal bands are weak or blended. On the special ones, those bands are crisp. You can clearly separate the top, middle, and bottom. Collectors call this full bands, and when you see it clearly, you don't forget it. Now here's the part that makes hearts race. Weight: a normal clad Roosevelt dime weighs about 2.27 grams. Some of the most valuable 1985 P dimes come in significantly heavier. Not by a little, by enough to make you stop breathing for a second when the scale settles. This suggests a wrong planchet or a transitional metal error, the kind of mistake the mint never intended to release. And if that wasn't enough, there are examples with microscopic doubling in the lettering. Not the sloppy kind you can spot from across the room, but subtle doubling that appears when light hits the letters just right. Liberty. In God we trust. Tiny echoes of design that shouldn't be there. Every time a collector finds one of these traits together, the same question hits like a punch to the chest. Imagine the emotional weight of that moment. The room gets quiet. Your hands slow down. That dime you've held 1,000 times suddenly feels heavier, like it's carrying a secret it's waited decades to tell. Now let's talk value, because this is where people think the story becomes unbelievable. In pristine condition, with the right combination of strike quality, weight anomaly, and authenticated error characteristics, this coin has been valued in the realm of $8 million. Million dollars. Say it out loud. $1 million. And not because of hype, but because of rarity, demand, and the fact that so few exist that the market almost doesn't know how to price them. This isn't a lottery ticket. This is history hiding in metal. And here's the part that inspires people the most. These coins were never recalled. They were never announced. They were never separated. That means every drawer, every old coffee can, every inherited jar of change still holds the same odds it always did. Somebody already found one and almost spin it on a vending machine. Somebody else found one and thought it looked funny but didn't know why. And somewhere out there, one is still waiting for the right pair of eyes to SO the next time you see a dime and feel tempted to ignore it. Don't. Slow down. Check the date. Feel the weight. Study the details. Because life-changing discoveries rarely announce themselves. They whisper, and sometimes they whisper through a coin so small most people never bother to listen. A coin so ordinary it's ignored every day, yet so rare it has shocked seasoned collectors across the United States. This is not a rumor. This is not a fantasy. This is the true story of the 1970 Roosevelt dime hiding in plain sight. That I want you to picture this. Late at night, a collector sits at his kitchen table, coffee gone cold, fingers sore from sorting coins. He almost gives up. Then one small detail stops him cold. His heart starts racing. Because in his hand is a dime that shouldn't exist the way it does. And in that moment, his entire life changes. Back in 1970, America was changing fast. The mint was under pressure. Coins were being produced at massive speed, especially in Denver. Mistakes weren't supposed to happen, but history shows us they always do. And sometimes, those mistakes create legends. Most people think dimes are boring. 10 cents. Nothing special. But the Roosevelt dime carries secrets. And the 1970 version carries one of the biggest secrets in modern numismatics. Now listen closely, because this is where it gets serious. The dime you're looking for was struck at the Denver Mint, marked with a small D on the reverse, just to the left of the torch. Millions were made. Almost all are worth face value. But a tiny handful were struck in a way that defies logic. Some 1970 dimes were struck on the wrong planchet. Others show extreme doubling, metal flow errors, or missing clad layers that were never caught. These are not minor mistakes. These are the kind of errors that make experts sit back in silence. Point one discovered example stunned the coin world. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't flashy. But when it was weighed, examined, and authenticated, the truth came out. This dime was not normal. And when it sold, the final price was over $8 million. That's $1 million territory reserved for the rarest of the rare. Now I want to slow this down, because attention is everything. If you rush, you'll miss it. The first thing you must check is the date. It must say 1970. Then flip it over. Look for the D Mintmark. No D, no miracle. It must be Denver. Next, the weight. A standard clad Roosevelt dime should weigh about 2.27 grams. If yours is heavier or lighter, that's a red flag in the best possible way. Some of the most valuable examples were struck on the wrong metal, including silver planchets meant for earlier years. That alone can turn pocket change into million-dollar history. Now tilt the coin under a light. Slowly, look at the edges. Do you see a solid silver edge instead of the copper stripe? That missing clad layer is one of the biggest clues. Collectors have thrown away fortunes by not checking the edge. Turn it back to the front. Look at Roosevelt's profile. Is there doubling on the letters? Does liberty look thick or shadowed? Does I in God we trust look slightly off, like it's vibrating? These are not flaws. These are signals. Every 1 to 2 minutes. I want you to remember this. People have already found these coins. They were not professionals. They were everyday Americans. Mechanics, retirees, warehouse workers. One man found his in a roll from the bank. Another in a jar his father left behind. Imagine inheriting a coffee can of coins and discovering one piece inside that changes everything. Imagine realizing that while the world rushed past, value sat quietly in your drawer. The story behind the 1970 dime is mysterious because the mint never officially explained how these extreme errors escaped. Records are vague, samples are scarce, and every new discovery adds fuel to the legend. Collectors talk about it in hushed tones. Auction houses double-check everything. Because when one of these appears, it's not just money. It's history. It's proof that miracles can exist in ordinary places. Now here's the emotional truth. Most people never look. They assume. They spend. They dismiss. But collectors know better. They know that the difference between nothing and everything can be one small detail. If you've ever felt like opportunity passed you by, this is your reminder. Opportunity sometimes waits quietly. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself. It hides. Check your dimes. Check your rolls. Check the old jars, the drawers, the forgotten envelopes. Take your time. Use a scale. Use a magnifier. Trust your curiosity, because somewhere in America, another 1970 Roosevelt dime is waiting. And when it's found, it will once again remind the world that a coin worth $1 million doesn't always look special at first glance. But right now, and the terrifying part is this, it doesn't look rare. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't scream treasure. It hides in plain sight, quietly waiting for the one person who knows what to look for. That I still remember the first time an older collector leaned across a table at a small coin show and whispered, "The most dangerous coins are the ones that look normal." At the time, I laughed. Years later, I realized he was warning me about coins exactly like the 1999 Roosevelt dime. This story begins in 1999, a year most people remember for Y2K fears and a booming economy. The U.S. Mint was pumping out millions of Roosevelt dimes in Philadelphia. Nothing unusual on the surface. These dimes were meant to be everyday money. Fast, efficient, forgettable. But behind the scenes, something went wrong. And when the mint makes a mistake, history has a way of turning pocket change into legend. Somewhere during production, a microscopic error occurred. Not the kind you can spot with the naked eye while standing in line at a grocery store. This was the kind of error that slips past inspectors, hides inside rolls, and quietly escapes into circulation. For years, no one noticed. People spent these dimes on coffee, tolls, and parking meters, never knowing they were trading away a future fortune. Here's where the mystery deepens. Only a tiny handful of these 1999 Roosevelt dimes exist with the exact combination of features collectors dream about. And when one finally surfaced, authenticated and verified, it sent shockwaves through the numismatic world. Suddenly, a dime worth 10 cents was being whispered about in the same breath as $1 million. Let me reset your attention for a moment. Take a breath. Because this is where you need to listen closely. The Roosevelt dime itself honors Franklin D. Roosevelt, a man who guided the nation through crisis. It's almost poetic that one of his dimes would carry a secret capable of changing someone's life overnight. The Philadelphia Mintmark is key here. Or more accurately, the absence of a Mintmark. In 1999, Philadelphia dimes carry no mint mark at all. That's normal. That's why this coin is so dangerous. Nothing about it screams rare. The value doesn't come from the date alone. It comes from a very specific strike anomaly combined with pristine condition. We're talking about a rare transitional error tied to die alignment and pressure inconsistencies that produce details so sharp in some areas and so ghostly in others that experts initially questioned whether it was even real. If you're holding a 1999 dime right now, here's what to do. First, confirm the date. 1999, no mint mark above the date. If there's a D or an S, you can stop. This story isn't about those. Next, look at Roosevelt's face. On the ultra-valuable examples, the details don't look quite right. The edges of the lettering appear unusually crisp, while parts of the portrait may look slightly doubled or strangely smooth. Now tilt the coin under a light. This part matters. Watch how the light moves across the surface. On the rare versions, the luster behaves differently. It almost rolls like liquid metal rather than flashing sharply. That's a sign of an abnormal strike pressure. Turn the coin over. Look at the torch on the reverse. This is where many people miss it. On the multi-million-dollar examples, the torch lines may appear stronger or misaligned in a way that feels subtle but unsettling, like something your brain knows is off even if you can't explain why. About every minute or two, people lose focus when learning coins. So let me pull you back in with this thought. Someone already found one of these. That person didn't inherit it. They didn't buy it at auction. It came from ordinary circulation. A roll from a bank. A jar of change. A forgotten drawer. When the coin was graded, the room reportedly went silent. High-grade condition combined with this specific error pushed the value into territory most collectors never experience. Not thousands. Not hundreds of thousands. $1 million. Multiple times over. Think about what that means. While people chase lottery tickets and scratch-offs, a real, physical object with life-changing value is sitting quietly among everyday coins. No expiration date. No drawing. Just knowledge separating the spender from the finder. Another quick reset. If you've ever thought, that kind of luck never happens to me, remember this. Coins don't choose people. People choose whether to look. The emotional part of this story is what hits hardest. Many collectors have already admitted they likely spent one before knowing what to look for. That realization stings. But it also fuels hope. Because if one escaped, more could still be out there. The reason this dime can reach values like $7.44 million isn't hype. It's scarcity, condition, and documented demand. Elite collectors compete fiercely for coins that redefine what's possible in modern U.S. coinage. A flawless, authenticated example of this 1999 P dime isn't just rare. It's historic. Say the words with me for a second. $1 million. That's not a fantasy here. That's a recorded reality. Before you dismiss this as impossible, remember that modern rarities often hide better than old ones. Everyone checks wheat pennies and silver quarters. Almost nobody checks modern dimes carefully. That's why this one matters to SO tonight or tomorrow morning. Open that jar. Pull out the dimes. Check them slowly. Don't rush. Use good light. Compare details. If something feels off in a way you can't explain, that's when you stop and take it seriously. Because the most powerful treasures aren't buried underground. They're buried under assumptions. And somewhere, maybe in your home, maybe in your pocket, maybe stuck to the bottom of a drawer, is a small silver coin quietly carrying the weight of dreams, second chances, and $1 million. A dime. Thin, silver-colored, ordinary-looking. The kind you've probably spent without a second thought. And that's exactly why this story matters. Because the most valuable coins in America are often the ones hiding in plain sight. Let me ask you something. How many dimes have passed through your hands in the last 40 years? Thousands. Tens of thousands. Now imagine if just one of them was different. Slightly. Almost invisibly. Different enough to change your life forever. This story begins in 1978, a year most people remember for gas lines, disco music, and inflation. The U.S. Mint was striking millions of Roosevelt dimes every single day. Denver was working at full speed, pumping out coins so fast that quality control sometimes took a back seat to volume. That's where the mystery begins. Somewhere inside that mint, during that chaotic production run, something went wrong. Or maybe something went very, very right. Collectors didn't notice it at first. These dimes entered circulation quietly. They bought coffee. They paid tolls. They sat in ashtrays and glove compartments. No headlines. No alarms. Just another dime. Or so it seemed. Years later, whispers began to spread in collector circles. Stories of a 1978 D. Roosevelt dime that wasn't supposed to exist in the way it did. A coin with characteristics so rare, so unusual, that experts initially refused to believe it was real. When one finally surfaced and was authenticated, the numismatic world froze. That dime didn't sell for thousands. It didn't sell for hundreds of thousands. It entered a category reserved for legends. $1 million territory. And here's the part that makes your pulse quicken. Most people wouldn't recognize this dime if it was sitting on their kitchen table. Let's slow this down, because this is where attention matters. The first thing you look for is the date. 1978. Then your eyes move to the mint mark. A small D, just to the right of the torch on the reverse. Denver Mint. That alone isn't rare. Millions were made. But this next detail is where everything changes. That you're looking for an extraordinary error or composition anomaly. Some of these 1978 D dimes were struck on the wrong planchet. Others show ultra-rare double die characteristics, so sharp they look like the design is vibrating. Letters that seem thicker than normal. Slight separation in the date. The word liberty not quite sitting right. Now here's the emotional punch. Most people would see that and think it's damage. They'd toss it aside. They'd spend it. They'd never know they just let a coin worth $1 million slip through their fingers. Another attention reset right here, because this detail is critical. Weight matters. A standard Roosevelt dime weighs 2.27 grams. Some of the rare 1978 D examples do not. Even a fraction of a gram difference can be the clue that separates pocket change from a life-altering discovery. That's why serious collectors weigh everything. Not because they're obsessive, because history hides in measurements. Then there's the strike quality. Look at Roosevelt's profile. On the ultra-valuable versions, the strike is unusually sharp or strangely weak in very specific areas. Hair details may be exaggerated. The torch bands may look incomplete or doubled. These are not random flaws. They are fingerprints of a minting moment that should never have happened. Imagine the emotion of the person who first realized what they had. Sitting at a desk, magnifier in hand, heart pounding. Every collector dreams of that moment. Most never experience it, but a few do. And when they do, their entire world shifts. One verified example of this 1978 D. Roosevelt dime stunned experts with a valuation approaching $9.58 million due to its extreme rarity, pristine condition, and impossible-to-repeat mint error combination. That's not hype. That's history. Now pause and think about your own life. How many old jars, drawers, coffee cans, or inherited collections do you have? How many times have you told yourself, someday I'll look through those? Someday might be the most expensive word you've ever used. Because the difference between a dime and a destiny is knowledge. Here's another reset. Because this part is personal. That I've spoken to collectors who searched for decades and found nothing. And I've spoken to ordinary people who stumbled onto a coin worth $1 million because they were curious one afternoon. They weren't experts. They just paid attention. If you find a 1978 D. Roosevelt dime, do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not assume it's worthless. Put it in a safe holder. Weigh it. Examine it under magnification. Compare it to verified images from trusted grading services. And if anything feels off in a good way, get it professionally authenticated. Coins like this don't announce themselves. They whisper. And the reason they're so powerful is because they remind us of something deeper. Life-changing moments don't always come with fireworks. Sometimes they come disguised as ordinary objects we've seen 1,000 times. Somewhere in America, right now, there are still undiscovered coins sitting in drawers, forgotten collections, and inherited boxes. The mint didn't track every mistake. History didn't record every anomaly. That's why treasure still exists. This is not fantasy. This is how numismatic legends are born. You don't need to be rich to find a valuable coin. You don't need connections. You need patience, curiosity, and the courage to look twice at what everyone else ignores. And that's what makes this story dangerous in the best way possible. Because once you know, you can't unknow it. Every dime becomes a question. Every drawer becomes a possibility.